Question 1. Which approach would be most appropriate for a BCP team leader to take when a critical system outage is reported by a junior analyst, but the full extent and impact of the outage are not yet confirmed? Option A. Conduct a rapid, focused assessment to verify the severity and scope of the outage against the BCP activation criteria before formally activating the team. Option B. Initiate BCP activation immediately, as any critical system outage warrants a full team response to ensure rapid recovery. Option C. Wait for a formal directive from a senior executive before initiating any BCP activation procedures. Option D. Activate the BCP team based on the junior analyst's report, assuming the worst-case scenario to err on the side of caution. The correct answer is B. Initiate BCP activation immediately, as any critical system outage warrants a full team response to ensure rapid recovery. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the immediate and potentially severe impact of a critical system failure on organizational operations and stakeholder trust. The decision to activate the Business Continuity Plan (BCP) team requires a rapid assessment of the situation against predefined criteria, balancing the risk of premature activation, leading to unnecessary resource drain and potential complacency, against the risk of delayed activation, exacerbating the impact and hindering recovery. The ethical dimension arises from the responsibility to protect the organization's interests, its employees, and its customers, all while adhering to established protocols and demonstrating sound judgment under pressure. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic evaluation of the incident against the predefined activation criteria outlined in the BCP. This aligns with the principles of good governance and risk management, ensuring that resources are deployed judiciously and effectively. Specifically, it adheres to the CBCP framework's emphasis on clear triggers for BCP activation, which are designed to be objective and measurable. This methodical approach minimizes subjective bias and ensures that the activation is a direct response to a validated disruption, thereby maximizing the effectiveness of the BCP team's efforts and demonstrating due diligence in protecting the organization. Incorrect approaches analysis. Activating the BCP team solely based on a single, unconfirmed report from a junior staff member without verifying the severity or scope of the issue represents a failure to follow established BCP protocols. This could lead to a false alarm, wasting valuable resources and potentially eroding confidence in the BCP process. It also bypasses the critical step of incident assessment, which is fundamental to effective BCP activation and response. Delaying activation until a senior manager explicitly authorizes it, even when initial reports suggest a significant disruption, is also problematic. This approach introduces an unnecessary bottleneck and can lead to critical delays in initiating the recovery process. The CBCP framework emphasizes timely response, and such a hierarchical delay can directly contravene this principle, potentially increasing the impact of the disruption and hindering the organization's ability to meet its recovery objectives. Activating the BCP team based on a gut feeling or a general sense of unease, without concrete evidence or a clear trigger event, is unprofessional and undermines the integrity of the BCP. This approach relies on subjective interpretation rather than objective criteria, which is contrary to the structured and evidence-based methodology promoted by the CBCP certification. Such an action could lead to misallocation of resources and damage the credibility of the BCP program. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes adherence to the documented BCP activation criteria. This involves a rapid but thorough assessment of the incident's impact, scope, and duration against these predefined triggers. If the incident meets the criteria, immediate activation is warranted. If there is ambiguity, a brief, focused investigation to confirm the severity should be conducted before a final decision. This structured approach ensures that BCP resources are deployed effectively and ethically, safeguarding organizational resilience. Question 2. The risk matrix shows a high-impact, low-probability threat to a critical customer-facing application. The current disaster recovery plan aims to restore the application's data within 24 hours, representing the recovery point objective, RPO. However, the business has indicated that any downtime beyond 4 hours for this application would result in significant financial losses and reputational damage. Defining the maximum tolerable downtime (MTD). The IT department has proposed a recovery strategy that can restore the application's functionality within 12 hours, establishing the Recovery Time Objective (RTO), which recovery metric, when aligned with the MTD, best guides the immediate focus for improving the disaster recovery plan to ensure business continuity. Option A. The recovery point objective (RPO) must be reduced to be less than or equal to the maximum tolerable downtime (MTD). Option B. The recovery time objective (RTO) must be reduced to be less than or equal to the recovery point objective (RPO). Option C. The recovery time objective (RTO) must be reduced to be less than or equal to the maximum tolerable downtime (MTD). Option D. The maximum tolerable downtime (MTD) must be increased to be greater than or equal to the recovery time objective (RTO). The correct answer is C. The recovery time objective (RTO) must be reduced to be less than or equal to the maximum tolerable downtime (MTD). Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of interconnected business continuity and disaster recovery terminology, particularly when faced with conflicting interpretations of critical metrics. The core challenge lies in aligning operational recovery capabilities with defined business objectives under pressure, ensuring that recovery efforts are both technically feasible and strategically aligned with business needs. Misinterpreting or misapplying these terms can lead to inadequate recovery plans, increased business impact, and potential regulatory noncompliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the business's ability to withstand and recover from disruptions by focusing on the most critical recovery objective. By aligning the recovery time objective (RTO) with the maximum tolerable downtime (MTD), the organization ensures that essential business functions are restored within the absolute limits of what the business can endure without catastrophic consequences. This directly addresses the fundamental goal of business continuity and resilience, which is to minimize the impact of disruptive events on the organization's operations and strategic objectives. This aligns with the principles of robust business continuity planning, emphasizing the need for clear, actionable, and business-driven recovery targets. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the recovery point objective (RPO) without considering the RTO or MTD fails to address the operational aspect of recovery. While minimizing data loss (RPO) is crucial, it does not guarantee that the business processes dependent on that data can be resumed in a timely manner. This could lead to a situation where data is recovered, but the business remains inoperable for an unacceptable duration, violating the MTD and leading to significant financial and reputational damage. This approach neglects the holistic nature of business continuity, which encompasses both data and operational recovery. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the recovery time objective (RTO) without considering the maximum tolerable downtime (MTD) is also flawed. While aiming for a fast RTO is desirable, if it exceeds the MTD, the business will still experience unacceptable downtime. This indicates a disconnect between the recovery target and the business's actual tolerance for disruption, potentially leading to severe consequences. This approach demonstrates a lack of understanding of the critical constraint imposed by the MTD. A further incorrect approach that focuses on minimizing the impact of a specific threat without clearly defining the RTO, RPO, or MTD for the affected business functions is insufficient. While threat assessment is a vital component of risk management, it must be translated into actionable recovery objectives. Without defined RTOs, RPO, and MTDs, it is impossible to adequately measure the effectiveness of recovery strategies or to ensure that the business can resume operations within acceptable parameters. This approach lacks the necessary specificity to guide effective business continuity planning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the business's critical functions and their associated impacts. This involves identifying the maximum tolerable downtime, MTD, for each function, which sets the absolute upper limit for recovery. Subsequently, recovery time objectives, RTO, are established, representing the desired time within which a business function must be restored. The recovery point objective, RPO, is then determined, defining the maximum acceptable amount of data loss. Finally, recovery strategies are developed and tested to ensure that the defined RTOs and RPOs can be met within the MTD, thereby achieving the organization's resilience goals. Question 3. The analysis reveals that a financial institution is considering its business continuity strategy. While reviewing potential threats, the team has identified a wide range of possibilities, from cyber attacks and natural disasters to supply chain disruptions and pandemics. To effectively assess the likelihood and potential impact of these identified threats, which of the following approaches would best align with the principles of robust risk management and regulatory expectations for due diligence in the financial sector? Option A. Develop a comprehensive risk matrix that systematically evaluates each threat's likelihood of occurrence and its potential impact on critical business functions, using a combination of historical data, expert judgment, and threat intelligence. Option B. Allocate resources to mitigate threats that are most frequently discussed in industry news and media, irrespective of their direct relevance or assessed impact on the organization. Option C. Focus exclusively on threats that have historically impacted the organization, assuming that future risks will mirror past events. Option D. Prioritize threats based on their potential to cause the most significant financial loss, regardless of their historical frequency or current likelihood. The correct answer is D. Prioritize threats based on their potential to cause the most significant financial loss, regardless of their historical frequency or current likelihood. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because accurately assessing the likelihood and potential impact of diverse threats requires a nuanced understanding of the organization's specific context, its operational environment, and the evolving threat landscape. It demands more than a superficial review. It requires critical judgment to differentiate between theoretical possibilities and credible risks that warrant mitigation. The Certified Business Continuity Planner, CBCP, certification emphasizes a structured, evidence-based approach to risk assessment, aligning with professional standards and regulatory expectations for due diligence. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it systematically evaluates both the probability of a threat occurring and the severity of its consequences. This aligns with the core principles of business continuity planning, which are implicitly supported by regulatory frameworks that mandate organizations to identify and manage risks to their operations and data. For instance, in the U.S., regulations like the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA, for financial institutions or HIPAA for healthcare organizations, while not explicitly detailing threat assessment methodologies, require robust risk management programs that necessitate such an analysis to ensure the protection of sensitive information and the continuity of critical services. A thorough assessment allows for prioritization of resources towards the most significant risks, ensuring compliance with the spirit of these regulations by demonstrating a proactive and comprehensive approach to risk mitigation. An incorrect approach that relies solely on historical incident data fails to account for emerging threats or changes in the threat landscape, potentially leading to a false sense of security and noncompliance with the proactive risk management expectations inherent in many regulatory frameworks. It neglects the forward-looking nature of threat analysis. Another incorrect approach that focuses only on high-impact, low-likelihood events overlooks more frequent, lower-impact threats that, in aggregate, can still significantly disrupt operations, thereby failing to meet the comprehensive risk assessment requirements. An approach that prioritizes threats based on media sensationalism rather than objective analysis demonstrates a lack of professional rigor and an abdication of responsibility to base decisions on evidence, which is a fundamental ethical and professional failing. Such an approach could lead to misallocation of resources and a failure to address genuine business risks, potentially violating regulatory requirements for sound risk management. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the organization's critical functions and assets. This is followed by a systematic identification of potential threats, drawing from various sources including industry reports, threat intelligence, and internal expertise. For each identified threat, a qualitative or quantitative assessment of likelihood and impact should be conducted, considering factors such as frequency, severity, and the organization's vulnerability. This assessment should be documented and reviewed regularly, allowing for adaptive risk management strategies that are both effective and compliant with relevant regulatory expectations. Question 4. The performance metrics show a recurring pattern of delays in critical customer service response times during simulated disruptive events, directly linked to identified vulnerabilities in the legacy CRM system's data retrieval capabilities and the manual handover process between support tiers. Considering the CBCP framework's emphasis on process optimization for resilience, which of the following actions best addresses these findings? Option A. Focus on enhancing the disaster recovery capabilities of the existing CRM system through increased backup frequency. Option B. Conduct a detailed root cause analysis of the CRM system's performance issues and document the findings for future reference. Option C. Allocate budget for additional temporary staff to handle increased call volumes during simulated events without altering the existing system or processes. Option D. Implement a phased upgrade of the CRM system to improve data retrieval speed and automate the handover process between support tiers, coupled with updated training for staff on the new procedures. The correct answer is D. Implement a phased upgrade of the CRM system to improve data retrieval speed and automate the handover process between support tiers, coupled with updated training for staff on the new procedures. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a business continuity planner to move beyond simply identifying vulnerabilities to actively optimizing processes based on those findings, all while adhering to the specific regulatory landscape of the Certified Business Continuity Planner (CBCP) framework. The CBCP framework emphasizes a holistic approach to business continuity, integrating risk management, incident response, and operational resilience. The core challenge lies in translating vulnerability assessment findings into actionable improvements that enhance overall organizational resilience without introducing new risks or violating compliance requirements. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the identified weaknesses through a structured, iterative process of improvement. This aligns with the CBCP emphasis on continuous improvement and proactive risk mitigation. By focusing on optimizing processes, the planner is not just fixing individual system flaws, but enhancing the organization's ability to withstand and recover from disruption. This proactive stance is crucial for meeting regulatory expectations that often mandate robust risk management and operational continuity frameworks. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate technical fixes without considering the broader process implications would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of holistic thinking, potentially leading to solutions that are brittle, difficult to maintain, or create new dependencies that are not adequately addressed in the overall business continuity plan. This could violate the spirit of regulatory frameworks that expect comprehensive resilience strategies, not just isolated technical patches. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes cost reduction over resilience would be ethically and regulatorily unsound. Such a decision could lead to under-resourced or inadequately protected critical functions, directly contravening the duty of care inherent in business continuity planning, and potentially violating regulations that mandate adequate resource allocation for continuity. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the identified vulnerabilities and their potential impact. This should be followed by an assessment of various mitigation strategies, evaluating each against criteria such as effectiveness, cost, feasibility, and alignment with regulatory requirements and organizational objectives. The chosen approach should be integrated into the overall business continuity strategy, with clear ownership, timelines, and metrics for success. Regular review and adaptation of these strategies are essential to maintain organizational resilience in a dynamic environment. Question 5. Operational review demonstrates that the Business Impact Analysis (BIA) has identified critical business functions with specific recovery time objectives (RTO) and recovery point objectives (RPO). The organization has a defined risk appetite and a budget for business continuity initiatives. Several potential recovery strategies have been identified, ranging from full IT replication to manual workarounds. The primary challenge is to select the most appropriate strategies that meet the BIA requirements while remaining cost-effective and aligned with organizational priorities. Which of the following approaches best addresses this challenge? Option A. Prioritize recovery strategies that offer the lowest upfront cost, assuming that cost savings will outweigh potential extended recovery times. Option B. Implement a strategy of replicating existing IT infrastructure for all critical functions, regardless of the specific RTO/RPO requirements or cost-effectiveness. Option C. Defer the final selection of recovery strategies until a disruptive event occurs, allowing for a more informed decision based on the actual circumstances of the incident. Option D. Select recovery strategies based on a comprehensive cost-benefit analysis that evaluates the financial implications of each strategy against the potential losses associated with not meeting RTOs and RPOs, while also considering organizational priorities and risk appetite. The correct answer is A. Prioritize recovery strategies that offer the lowest upfront cost, assuming that cost savings will outweigh potential extended recovery times. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing competing organizational priorities, resource constraints, and regulatory compliance when selecting recovery strategies. The Business Impact Analysis (BIA) has identified critical business functions and their recovery time objectives (RTO) and recovery point objectives (RPO). But the organization faces budget limitations and a desire to minimize disruption to ongoing operations. Choosing the most appropriate recovery strategies necessitates a nuanced understanding of risk appetite, cost-benefit trade-offs, and the potential impact of different recovery approaches on business continuity and resilience. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly aligns recovery strategy selection with the findings of the BIA and a thorough cost-benefit analysis, while also considering organizational priorities. This ensures that resources are allocated effectively to address the most critical risks and meet defined RTOs/RPOs. Adhering to the principles of business continuity planning, as often outlined in frameworks like those associated with the CBCP certification, mandates a data-driven approach that prioritizes resilience and operational continuity in a cost-effective manner. This approach demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to safeguarding the organization's ability to operate during and after a disruptive event, which is a core ethical and professional responsibility. An incorrect approach that prioritizes the cheapest available solutions without a proper cost-benefit analysis or consideration of RTOs/RPOs is professionally unacceptable. This failure to adequately assess the value and effectiveness of recovery options can lead to insufficient resilience, increased financial losses during an incident, and potential regulatory noncompliance if critical functions cannot be restored within mandated timeframes. Ethically, it represents a dereliction of duty to protect the organization's assets and stakeholders. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on replicating existing IT infrastructure without considering alternative, potentially more cost-effective or resilient solutions, ignores the opportunity for optimization and innovation. This can lead to inefficient resource allocation and may not adequately address all identified risks, particularly those that are not purely IT dependent. It fails to leverage the full scope of recovery strategy options available and may not be the most prudent use of organizational funds. A third incorrect approach that delays strategy selection until an incident occurs is a critical failure. This reactive stance is contrary to the proactive nature of business continuity planning. It demonstrates a lack of preparedness and significantly increases the likelihood of prolonged downtime, reputational damage, and financial losses. This approach violates the fundamental principles of risk management and business continuity, which emphasize planning and preparation before an event. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Thoroughly review and understand the BIA findings, including RTOs, RPO, and critical dependencies. 2. Conduct a comprehensive cost-benefit analysis for each potential recovery strategy, considering not only direct costs, but also potential savings from avoided losses and the value of meeting RTOs/RPOs. 3. Evaluate each strategy against organizational priorities, risk appetite, and available resources. 4. Engage relevant stakeholders to gain consensus and ensure buy-in for the selected strategies. 5. Document the rationale for the chosen strategies, linking them back to the BIA and cost-benefit analysis. 6. Regularly review and update recovery strategies as the business environment, risks, and organizational priorities evolve. Question 6. During the evaluation of a business continuity program's effectiveness and resource allocation, which approach best aligns with the core principles of protecting organizational assets ensuring operational resilience, maintaining stakeholder confidence, and fulfilling legal and regulatory compliance obligations. Option A. Implementing BCP activities based on their perceived simplicity and speed of deployment, regardless of their impact on critical operations or compliance requirements. Option B. Developing a BCP strategy that emphasizes theoretical resilience capabilities without explicitly linking them to specific organizational risks or the legal and regulatory framework. Option C. Prioritizing BCP initiatives that directly address identified critical business functions, mitigate significant operational risks, and satisfy specific legal and regulatory mandates, while also demonstrating a clear return on investment in terms of risk reduction and stakeholder trust. Option D. Focusing BCP efforts primarily on initiatives that offer the most immediate cost savings, as budget constraints are the primary driver for program evaluation. The correct answer is C. Prioritizing BCP initiatives that directly address identified critical business functions, mitigate significant operational risks, and satisfy specific legal and regulatory mandates, while also demonstrating a clear return on investment in terms of risk reduction and stakeholder trust. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in business continuity planning, where competing priorities and resource constraints necessitate a strategic approach to demonstrating the value of BCP. The challenge lies in translating the abstract benefits of BCP into tangible outcomes that resonate with senior leadership, particularly when faced with budget limitations. A thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape is crucial, as non-compliance can lead to significant penalties and reputational damage, making the justification for BCP investment a critical exercise in risk management and strategic alignment. Correct approach analysis. Prioritizing BCP initiatives based on their direct contribution to protecting critical assets, ensuring operational resilience, and maintaining stakeholder confidence, while also explicitly addressing legal and regulatory compliance requirements, represents best professional practice. This approach aligns BCP efforts with core business objectives and mandated obligations. For a certified business continuity planner, CBCP, this means understanding the specific regulations applicable to their industry and jurisdiction, such as those mandated by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, for publicly traded companies, or the Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council, FFIC, for financial institutions, which often dictate specific resilience and recovery requirements. By demonstrating how BCP mitigates risks associated with non-compliance and operational disruptions, a planner can effectively justify resource allocation and secure necessary support. Incorrect approach is analysis. Focusing solely on cost reduction without considering the impact on operational resilience or regulatory adherence is a significant ethical and professional failure. This approach ignores the fundamental purpose of BCP, which is to ensure continuity of critical functions and protect the organization from catastrophic losses, including those stemming from regulatory penalties. Such a narrow focus can lead to under-resourced BCP programs that are inadequate to meet recovery objectives or comply with legal mandates. Prioritizing BCP activities based on perceived ease of implementation rather than their criticality to business operations or regulatory requirements is another failure. This approach risks neglecting essential recovery capabilities for critical business functions or failing to address specific compliance obligations, leaving the organization vulnerable. It demonstrates a lack of strategic thinking and a failure to understand the interconnectedness of BCP with overall business strategy and legal obligations. Emphasizing theoretical BCP benefits without linking them to specific organizational risks or regulatory mandates is insufficient. While theoretical benefits are important, a professional planner must translate these into concrete actions and demonstrable outcomes that address the organization's unique risk profile and compliance landscape. Without this linkage, BCP initiatives may be seen as abstract exercises rather than essential risk mitigation strategies, hindering their adoption and funding. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based and compliance-driven approach. This involves identifying critical business functions, understanding the associated risks, including regulatory noncompliance, and prioritizing BCP activities that directly mitigate these risks and ensure adherence to legal and regulatory frameworks. The decision-making process should involve close collaboration with legal counsel, compliance officers, and business unit leaders to ensure that BCP strategies are comprehensive, effective, and aligned with organizational objectives and obligations. The CBCP certification itself implies a commitment to upholding these professional standards. Question 7. Process analysis reveals that a certified business continuity planner, CBCP, has identified a significant, previously unaddressed vulnerability in the organization's critical IT infrastructure during a routine plan review. This vulnerability, if exploited, could lead to a prolonged service outage impacting core business operations. The CBCP direct manager, under pressure from senior executives concerned about upcoming investor relations meetings, has instructed the CBCP to soften the report's language and downplay the severity of the finding to avoid causing alarm. The CBCP is now faced with a decision on how to proceed. Option A. Attempt to subtly rephrase the technical details of the vulnerability to make it sound less critical without outright misrepresenting the core issue. Option B. Resign from the position immediately without formally escalating the issue to maintain personal ethical standards. Option C. Document the finding accurately, report it to the next level of management, and if necessary, to the organization's ethics committee or compliance officer, while adhering to established reporting protocols. Option D. Modify the report to reflect the manager's requested softened language and downplay the severity of the vulnerability to avoid negative attention. The correct answer is C. Document the finding accurately, report it to the next level of management, and, if necessary, to the organization's ethics committee or compliance officer, while adhering to established reporting protocols. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents an ethical dilemma where a business continuity planner, BCP, is pressured by senior management to downplay a critical finding during a business continuity plan, BCP, review. The pressure stems from a desire to avoid negative publicity and potential investor concern, which directly conflicts with the BCP's responsibility to accurately report risks and ensure organizational resilience. The challenge lies in balancing the BCP's professional duty to uphold the integrity of the BCP program with the organizational pressures to present a favorable, albeit potentially misleading, picture. This requires navigating a complex ethical landscape where professional integrity is tested against business interests. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves the BCP escalating the issue through appropriate channels, adhering to the organization's established reporting structure, and potentially its code of ethics or professional conduct guidelines. This upholds the principle of transparency and accuracy, which are fundamental to effective business continuity planning. By documenting the findings and communicating them to higher levels of management or an ethics committee, the BCP ensures that the organization is aware of the true risk exposure. This aligns with the professional responsibility to provide objective assessments and recommendations, thereby enabling informed decision-making for risk mitigation and preparedness. Such actions are implicitly supported by professional standards that emphasize integrity and due diligence in BCP activities. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves succumbing to management pressure and omitting or significantly downplaying the critical finding. This is a direct violation of professional ethics, which mandates honesty and accuracy in reporting, undermines the credibility of the BCP program, and leaves the organization vulnerable to the identified risks, potentially leading to severe consequences during a disruption. This failure to report accurately can also be seen as a breach of due diligence, as the BCP has not fulfilled their responsibility to inform stakeholders of material risks. Another incorrect approach is to resign without formally escalating the issue. While this may preserve the BCP's personal integrity, it fails to protect the organization from the identified risk. The BCP has a professional obligation that extends beyond personal comfort to ensuring the organization's preparedness. Resignation without proper escalation leaves the organization unaware of the critical vulnerability, which is a dereliction of professional duty. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to subtly alter the findings to appease management without outright lying. This is a form of professional dishonesty and misrepresentation. It still compromises the accuracy of the BCP assessment and can lead to flawed decision-making. The intent to mislead, even subtly, erodes trust in professional standards, professional reasoning, Professionals facing such dilemmas should first consult their organization's code of conduct and any professional body guidelines they adhere to. They should meticulously document all findings, communications, and pressures. The decision-making process should prioritize transparency, accuracy, and the organization's long-term resilience. If direct communication with management fails to resolve the issue, escalation through established grievance or ethics channels is the next logical step. The ultimate goal is to ensure that the organization has a realistic understanding of its risks and the BCP program is not compromised by undue influence. Question 8. Strategic planning requires a clear understanding of how different resilience components integrate. A senior executive, focused on immediate budget reductions, has directed that the disaster recovery (DR) component of the organization's business continuity plan (BCP) be significantly scaled back, arguing that DR is a separate, less critical function than the broader business continuity strategy. As a certified business continuity planner (CBCP), how should you respond to this directive to ensure the organization's overall resilience and compliance? Option A. Propose a complete overhaul of the BCP to eliminate the DR component entirely, arguing that the organization should focus solely on preventative measures and accept the inherent risks of IT system failure. Option B. Agree to scale back the DR component as directed, but make a note in your personal files of the potential risks without formally challenging the decision or informing the executive of the broader implications. Option C. Advocate for the full scope of the BCP, emphasizing that DR is a critical tactical component essential for the operational recovery of IT systems, which underpins most business functions, and that scaling it back undermines the overall BCP strategy and potential regulatory compliance. Option D. Immediately implement the executive's directive to scale back the DR component to demonstrate responsiveness to management priorities and focus resources on other aspects of the BCP that are perceived as more strategic. Correct answer is C. Advocate for the full scope of the BCP, emphasizing that DR is a critical tactical component essential for the operational recovery of IT systems, which underpins most business functions, and that scaling it back undermines the overall BCP strategy and potential regulatory compliance. Explanation. This scenario presents a common ethical and professional challenge where a senior executive, focused on immediate cost savings and a narrow interpretation of a specific recovery objective, attempts to deprioritize a critical component of a broader business continuity strategy. The challenge lies in balancing the executive's directive with the established principles of business continuity planning and the potential regulatory implications of inadequate preparedness. The executive's perspective, while driven by a desire for efficiency, overlooks the interconnectedness of business continuity and disaster recovery, and the strategic imperative of a holistic approach. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it upholds the fundamental principle that business continuity planning, BCP, is a comprehensive strategic framework encompassing all aspects of an organization's resilience, including the tactical execution of disaster recovery, DR. DR is a subset of BCP, specifically addressing the recovery of IT systems and infrastructure after a disruptive event. By advocating for the full scope of the BCP, including its DR components, the planner demonstrates an understanding of regulatory requirements that often mandate a robust and integrated approach to business resilience, not just isolated recovery capabilities. This aligns with the ethical obligation to provide sound professional advice that safeguards the organization's ability to operate and meet its commitments, thereby protecting stakeholders and adhering to industry best practices and potential regulatory mandates for preparedness. An incorrect approach that prioritizes only the immediate cost-saving directive over the integrated BCP would be professionally unacceptable. This would represent a failure to adhere to the principles of comprehensive risk management and business resilience, potentially exposing the organization to significant operational and financial risks during a disruption. Ethically, it would be a dereliction of duty to not advise on the full implications of such a decision. From a regulatory standpoint, depending on the specific jurisdiction and industry, such a decision could lead to non-compliance with regulations that require organizations to have documented and tested business continuity plans that address all critical business functions, including IT recovery. Another incorrect approach would be to blindly follow the executive's directive without attempting to educate them on the broader strategic implications and potential risks. This demonstrates a lack of professional courage and a failure to fulfill the role of a trusted advisor. It prioritizes compliance with a directive over professional responsibility and the organization's long-term well-being. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear and concise communication of the strategic importance of BCP and its relationship with DR. This includes articulating the potential risks and regulatory consequences of deprioritizing critical components. The professional should present data-driven arguments, referencing industry standards and best practices to support the need for a holistic approach. If the executive remains insistent, the professional should document their concerns and recommendations, ensuring that the decision and its rationale are formally recorded, thereby protecting themselves and highlighting the potential risks to the organization. Question 9. Regulatory review indicates that a critical business continuity plan requires formal sign-off from the Chief Information Officer, CIO, the head of operations, and the legal counsel before it can be officially implemented. Due to an impending but not yet realized threat that has caused significant internal anxiety, the head of IT, who is a direct report to the CIO, has verbally assured the business continuity manager that the CIO is fully on board and that the plan can be deployed immediately to be safe. The business continuity manager is under pressure to act quickly. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Implement the plan immediately and then initiate the formal sign-off process, presenting the implemented plan as a fait accompli to the approvers. Option B. Proceed with the implementation of the plan, but only after obtaining a written email confirmation from the head of IT stating that the CIO has authorized this immediate deployment. Option C. Inform the head of IT that while the urgency is understood, formal written approval from the CIO, head of operations, and legal counsel is a mandatory requirement as per policy, and that implementation cannot proceed until all signatures are obtained. Option D. Proceed with the implementation of the plan immediately, relying on the verbal assurance from the head of IT that the CIO is supportive, and plan to obtain formal written sign-off from all parties as soon as the immediate perceived threat has passed. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the implementation of the plan immediately, relying on the verbal assurance from the head of IT that the CIO is supportive, and plan to obtain formal written sign-off from all parties as soon as the immediate perceived threat has passed. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves navigating conflicting priorities between expediency and the rigorous adherence to established governance processes for plan approval. The pressure to deploy a business continuity plan quickly, especially in the face of perceived urgency, can tempt individuals to bypass or expedite formal sign-off procedures. However, the CBCP certification emphasizes the importance of robust governance and accountability, which are intrinsically linked to proper plan approval. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes formal, documented approval from all designated stakeholders. This ensures that the plan has been reviewed, understood, and accepted by those with the authority and responsibility for its execution and oversight. This aligns with the principles of good governance and risk management, as it provides a clear audit trail and demonstrates due diligence. Specifically, for the CBCP, this adherence to formal approval processes is a cornerstone of demonstrating competence and ethical conduct, ensuring that plans are not only technically sound, but also organizationally sanctioned and supported. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the plan without full sign-off, even with a verbal assurance from a senior manager, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses the established governance framework, potentially leaving the organization exposed if the plan is later challenged or found to be inadequate. Lack of formal documentation means there is no clear record of approval, which can be critical during post-incident reviews or audits. This also undermines the accountability of other key stakeholders who have not formally endorsed the plan. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed with the plan and then seek retrospective approval, is also professionally unacceptable. While it might seem like a compromise, it still circumvents the intended approval process. Retrospective approval does not guarantee that the plan was adequately reviewed by all necessary parties at the time it was needed. It creates a weak audit trail and can be seen as an attempt to legitimize a premature action rather than a commitment to proper process. This can lead to a perception of corner cutting and a lack of respect for established procedures. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the organization's documented plan approval policy. When faced with pressure to expedite, a planner should first confirm the exact requirements for sign-off. If there is a genuine, documented emergency that necessitates immediate action, the planner should consult with their direct supervisor and the designated approvers to determine if an interim, documented authorization can be granted, with a clear commitment to obtaining full formal approval as soon as practically possible. The focus should always be on maintaining the integrity of the governance process while managing risks effectively. Question 10. The assessment process reveals that the business continuity plan has not been formally reviewed or tested in over 2 years, primarily due to perceived budget constraints and a lack of immediate perceived threats. The continuity team is considering several approaches to address this gap. Which approach best aligns with professional best practices for plan maintenance and testing within a regulated environment? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive, organization-wide tabletop exercise annually, regardless of specific threat assessments, to ensure all departments are broadly familiar with the plan. Option B. Rely on key personnel to verbally update the plan based on their ongoing knowledge of operational changes and potential disruptions. Option C. Defer all formal plan maintenance and testing until a significant disruptive event occurs, at which point the plan can be updated based on real-world experience. Option D. Implement a phased approach to plan maintenance and testing, prioritizing critical business functions and high-impact scenarios based on a recent risk assessment, and documenting all changes and test results. Correct answer is D. Implement a phased approach to plan maintenance and testing, prioritizing critical business functions and high-impact scenarios based on a recent risk assessment, and documenting all changes and test results. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common yet critical challenge in business continuity planning: the tension between maintaining an up-to-date plan and the resource constraints that often plague organizations. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a certified business continuity planner, CBCP, to balance the imperative of regulatory compliance and organizational resilience with practical limitations. The CBCP must exercise sound professional judgment to ensure that plan maintenance and testing, while essential, are conducted in a manner that is both effective and achievable within the organization's operational realities. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a risk-based methodology for plan maintenance and testing. This aligns with the principles of effective business continuity management, which advocate for focusing resources on the most critical business functions and the most probable or impactful threats. By systematically reviewing and testing plans based on identified risks and changes in the business environment, the organization ensures that its continuity capabilities remain relevant and effective. This proactive and strategic approach minimizes the likelihood of critical failures during a disruption and demonstrates due diligence in meeting the spirit and letter of regulatory expectations for preparedness. An incorrect approach that involves neglecting plan updates due to perceived lack of immediate impact fails to acknowledge the dynamic nature of business operations and the threat landscape. This can lead to a plan that is obsolete, ineffective, and ultimately non-compliant with regulatory requirements that mandate current and tested continuity measures. Such a failure could result in significant operational disruption, financial loss, and reputational damage during an actual incident, as well as potential penalties for non-compliance. Another incorrect approach, that of conducting extensive, unfocused testing without clear objectives or a risk-based rationale, represents a waste of valuable resources. While testing is crucial, it must be targeted and proportionate to the identified risks and the criticality of the functions being tested. This approach, while seemingly thorough, can lead to testing fatigue and a false sense of security, as the organization may be expending effort on low-priority areas while neglecting more significant vulnerabilities. It also fails to demonstrate a strategic and efficient use of resources, which is a hallmark of professional business continuity management. Finally, an approach that relies solely on anecdotal evidence or the memory of key personnel for plan updates, without formal review and testing processes, is highly susceptible to error and omission. This informal method is not auditable, lacks a clear trail of due diligence, and is vulnerable to the departure of key individuals. It fails to establish a robust and repeatable process for ensuring plan currency and effectiveness. thereby exposing the organization to significant risks and potential regulatory scrutiny. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a structured approach. First, understand the organization's risk appetite and regulatory obligations. Second, implement a risk-based framework for prioritizing maintenance and testing activities. Third, establish clear metrics for evaluating the effectiveness of maintenance and testing. Fourth, communicate the rationale for the chosen approach to stakeholders, ensuring buy-in and understanding of resource allocation. Finally, continuously monitor and adapt the maintenance and testing strategy based on lessons learned and changes in the business environment. Question 11. Operational review demonstrates that a critical business process is heavily reliant on a single third-party vendor for a core service. While the vendor has provided documentation of their business continuity and disaster recovery plans, the potential impact of their service disruption on the organization's operations is assessed as high. The organization has already implemented internal controls to mitigate some operational risks. Considering the residual risk associated with this third-party dependency, which of the following represents the most appropriate risk treatment strategy? Option A. Immediately terminate the contract with the vendor and seek an alternative provider, even if it incurs significant transition costs and potential short-term operational disruption. Option B. Focus solely on further enhancing internal mitigation strategies, assuming that the organization can absorb the impact of the vendor's failure through its own resources. Option C. Accept the residual risk, assuming the vendor's documented plans are sufficient and that the likelihood of a significant disruption is low enough to warrant no further action. Option D. Negotiate enhanced contractual clauses within the service level agreement (SLA) with the vendor, mandating specific business continuity and disaster recovery capabilities and response times, and explore appropriate insurance coverage, e.g., business interruption, cyber insurance, to cover potential financial losses. The correct answer is D. Negotiate enhanced contractual clauses within the service level agreement (SLA) with the vendor, mandating specific business continuity and disaster recovery capabilities and response times, and explore appropriate insurance coverage, e.g., business interruption, cyber insurance, to cover potential financial losses. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in business continuity planning, effectively managing residual risk after implementing primary mitigation strategies. The organization has identified a critical dependency on a single third-party vendor for a core operational service. While the vendor has its own business continuity plan, the potential impact of their failure on the organization's operations is significant and could lead to substantial financial losses and reputational damage. The challenge lies in determining the most appropriate risk treatment strategy for this identified residual risk, balancing cost, effectiveness, and regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that quantifies the potential impact of the vendor's failure and evaluates the likelihood of such an event. Based on this assessment, transferring a portion of this risk through a robust service level agreement, SLA, with the vendor, which includes specific business continuity and disaster recovery clauses, and potentially supplementing this with cyber insurance or business interruption insurance, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of risk management and the need to protect the organization's stakeholders. The CBCP framework emphasizes a layered approach to risk treatment, where transfer mechanisms are considered after other controls. The regulatory framework for business continuity planning, particularly in the financial services sector, often a focus for CBCP certification, mandates that organizations demonstrate due diligence in managing third-party risks and ensuring operational resilience. Insurance and contractual agreements are recognized tools for achieving this. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the vendor's stated business continuity capabilities without independent verification or contractual safeguards. This fails to acknowledge the inherent risks of third-party dependencies and could lead to a significant gap in the organization's own resilience. Ethically, this demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to protect the organization's interests. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the residual risk, assuming it is negligible. This is a direct violation of risk management principles and could result in severe consequences during an actual disruption. It also fails to meet the implicit or explicit regulatory expectations for proactive risk management. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on internal mitigation without considering external transfer mechanisms might be overly costly or impractical, leaving the organization exposed to risks that could be more efficiently managed through other means. The professional decision-making process should involve a structured risk assessment, followed by the evaluation of various risk treatment options: avoid, mitigate, transfer, accept. For the transfer option, this includes assessing the suitability and cost-effectiveness of insurance products and contractual clauses. The decision should be informed by the organization's risk appetite, regulatory obligations, and the potential impact of the risk. Question 12. Implementation of a robust plan version control system is crucial for maintaining the integrity and effectiveness of a business continuity plan. Which of the following approaches best exemplifies professional best practice in managing plan updates and revisions within a regulated environment? Option A. Establishing a formal, documented process with clear version identification, a detailed change log, defined approval workflows, and a retention policy for superseded versions. Option B. Overriding previous plan versions with new ones without any formal tracking or notification to stakeholders. Option C. Allowing multiple active versions of the plan to exist concurrently to accommodate different departmental needs. Option D. Discarding all previous plan versions immediately after a new version is approved and implemented. The correct answer is A. Establishing a formal, documented process with clear version identification, a detailed change log, defined approval workflows, and a retention policy for superseded versions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. Managing plan version control in business continuity planning is a critical but often overlooked aspect. The challenge lies in ensuring that the most current, approved, and relevant version of the plan is accessible and understood by all stakeholders, while also maintaining a historical record of changes. Failure to do so can lead to the execution of outdated procedures, miscommunication during a crisis, and non-compliance with regulatory requirements for documented and tested plans. This scenario demands meticulous attention to detail and a systematic approach to document management. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice for plan version control involves establishing a formal, documented process that includes clear identification of each plan version, e.g., using sequential numbering or dates, a change log detailing modifications, approval workflows for updates, and a defined retention policy for superseded versions. This approach ensures that only the authorized and current version is in active use, minimizing the risk of errors during an incident. It directly supports the principles of good governance and operational resilience, which are implicitly or explicitly required by many regulatory frameworks that mandate up-to-date and effective business continuity plans. Maintaining a clear audit trail of changes also facilitates post-incident reviews and continuous improvement, aligning with best practices for program maturity. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely on informal methods, such as simply overriding the previous version of the plan document without any formal tracking or notification. This creates significant risk as it is impossible to revert to a previous state if the new version proves problematic or if a historical record is needed for analysis. It represents a failure in due diligence and can lead to operational chaos during an event, potentially violating the spirit of regulatory requirements for robust and auditable plans. Another incorrect approach is to maintain multiple active versions of the plan simultaneously, perhaps due to delays in the approval process or a lack of clear communication channels. This leads to confusion among personnel about which plan to follow, increasing the likelihood of inconsistent responses and potentially critical errors during an emergency. This ambiguity directly undermines the effectiveness of the business continuity program and fails to meet the expectation of a single, authoritative plan for response. A third incorrect approach is to discard all previous versions of the plan immediately after an update, without retaining them for a defined period. While space might be a concern, this practice eliminates the ability to conduct thorough post-incident reviews, understand the evolution of the plan, or provide evidence of compliance history if required. It also prevents the organization from learning from past iterations and can hinder the identification of recurring issues or the effectiveness of previous mitigation strategies. This lack of historical data is a significant gap in a mature business continuity management system. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach plan version control by first understanding the organization's specific needs and any applicable regulatory expectations. The decision-making process should prioritize clarity, accountability, and auditability. This involves selecting a version control system, whether manual or automated, that can clearly identify, track, and manage plan revisions. Establishing clear roles and responsibilities for plan maintenance, review, and approval is paramount. Furthermore, a defined communication strategy to inform stakeholders of plan updates is essential. Regularly reviewing and testing the version control process itself ensures its continued effectiveness and compliance. Question 13. The control framework reveals that an organization is considering a cold site strategy for its primary data center recovery. Given the organization's critical business functions have varying recovery time objectives, which of the following evaluations best aligns with best practices for selecting a recovery site? Option A. Deploy the cold site immediately for all critical functions, assuming that the time required for setup is acceptable for all operations. Option B. Prioritize the cold site option solely based on its lower upfront cost, irrespective of the recovery time objectives of critical business functions. Option C. Evaluate the cold site's suitability for functions with longer recovery time objectives, while exploring alternative, faster recovery solutions for functions with stringent recovery time objectives. Option D. Implement the cold site strategy for all business functions to achieve maximum cost savings and operational simplicity. Correct answer is C. Evaluate the cold site suitability for functions with longer recovery time objectives, while exploring alternative, faster recovery solutions for functions with stringent recovery time objectives. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in business continuity planning, selecting the most appropriate recovery site strategy given resource constraints and recovery time objectives. The professional challenge lies in balancing the cost-effectiveness of a cold site with the speed of recovery required by critical business functions, all while adhering to relevant regulatory expectations for resilience. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen solution adequately addresses potential disruptions without incurring unnecessary expenditure. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it aligns the recovery site's capabilities with the specific recovery time objectives (RTO) and recovery point objectives (RPO) of critical business functions. A cold site, by its nature, requires significant time for setup and provisioning of equipment and data. Therefore, its suitability is limited to functions with longer RTOs that can tolerate this delay. This approach demonstrates a thorough understanding of the business's operational needs and the limitations of different recovery site types, ensuring a pragmatic and effective business continuity strategy that meets regulatory expectations for resilience without overinvesting. An incorrect approach that selects a cold site for functions with very short RTOs fails to meet regulatory requirements for timely recovery. This could lead to significant financial losses, reputational damage, and potential regulatory penalties for non-compliance with resilience mandates. Ethically, it represents a failure to adequately protect the organization and its stakeholders from the impact of a disruption. Another incorrect approach that proposes a cold site as a universal solution for all business functions, regardless of their RTOs, demonstrates a lack of nuanced understanding of recovery strategies. This approach is not only inefficient, but also fails to address the immediate needs of critical operations, thereby violating the principle of ensuring business continuity. A further incorrect approach that prioritizes cost savings above all else, even when it compromises the ability to meet essential recovery objectives, is professionally unsound. While cost-effectiveness is important, it should not supersede the fundamental requirement of ensuring business resilience and compliance with regulatory obligations. This approach risks significant business impact and potential regulatory scrutiny. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a comprehensive risk assessment, a detailed analysis of business impact, and the clear definition of RTOs and RPOs for all critical functions. This should be followed by an evaluation of various recovery site options, considering their capabilities, costs, and lead times for activation. The chosen strategy must then be documented, tested regularly, and reviewed to ensure its continued effectiveness and alignment with evolving business needs and regulatory landscapes. Question 14. Process analysis reveals that a critical business system has experienced a catastrophic data loss event. The primary data recovery objective is to restore operational functionality as quickly as possible while ensuring data integrity and compliance with relevant data protection regulations. Given the urgency, what is the most appropriate approach to restoring data from backups? Option A. Select a backup based on the perceived fastest access time and begin the restoration process without further validation. Option B. Bypass established data recovery procedures to expedite the restoration, relying on the technical team's expertise to manage the process. Option C. Execute a phased restoration, starting with verifying backup media integrity, performing a test restore in an isolated environment, and then proceeding with the full restoration according to documented procedures. Option D. Immediately initiate restoration from the most recent available backup, prioritizing speed to minimize downtime. Correct answer is D. Immediately initiate restoration from the most recent available backup, prioritizing speed to minimize downtime. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common yet critical challenge in business continuity planning: the integrity and accessibility of data backups during a disaster. The professional challenge lies in balancing the urgency of restoration with the absolute necessity of ensuring the recovered data is accurate, complete, and compliant with regulatory requirements. The pressure to restore services quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise data integrity, leading to significant financial, operational, and reputational damage, as well as regulatory penalties. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a systematic, validated restoration process. This involves verifying the integrity of the chosen backup media, performing a test restoration in an isolated environment, and then executing the full restoration according to documented procedures. This aligns with the principles of data governance and the requirements often found in regulatory frameworks such as the NIST SB 800-34 Contingency Planning Guide for Federal Information Systems, which emphasizes testing and validation of recovery procedures. By following a structured, tested approach, the organization minimizes the risk of data corruption, loss, or noncompliance, thereby upholding its duty of care and regulatory obligations. This methodical approach ensures that the restored data is reliable for business operations and meets any audit or compliance demands. Incorrect approaches analysis. Restoring directly from the most recent backup without verification or testing is professionally unacceptable. This bypasses critical validation steps, significantly increasing the risk of restoring corrupted or incomplete data. This failure could lead to regulatory violations related to data accuracy and availability, potentially impacting financial reporting or customer data integrity, which are often subject to specific compliance mandates, e.g., Sarbanes-Oxley Act for financial data. Choosing a backup based solely on perceived speed of access, without confirming its integrity or suitability for the specific data type, is also professionally unsound. This overlooks the fundamental requirement for reliable data recovery. If the chosen backup is itself compromised or incomplete, the restoration effort will be futile and could lead to prolonged downtime and regulatory scrutiny for failing to meet recovery objectives. Attempting to restore data without consulting or adhering to the established data recovery procedures is a direct violation of documented best practices and internal controls. This ad hoc approach introduces significant risk of error, omission, and noncompliance. Regulatory bodies often require documented and tested recovery plans, and deviating from them without proper authorization and risk assessment is a serious ethical and professional failing. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes risk assessment, adherence to documented procedures, and validation at each critical stage of the recovery process. This involves 1. Understanding the criticality of the data being restored and the associated regulatory requirements. 2. Consulting and strictly following the organization's approved data recovery plan. 3. Verifying the integrity of backup media before initiating restoration. 4. Performing test restorations in a controlled environment to validate the process and the recovered data. 5. Documenting all steps taken and any deviations from the plan, with justifications. This systematic approach ensures that recovery efforts are effective, efficient, and compliant. Question 15. Stakeholder feedback indicates that while the business continuity plan is comprehensive, there are concerns regarding its accessibility during a crisis and the potential for unauthorized access to sensitive operational details. considering the need to ensure the plan is readily available to those who need it while maintaining appropriate security. Which of the following approaches best addresses these concerns? Option A. Store the business continuity plan exclusively on a single, password-protected laptop kept in the CEO's office. Option B. Upload the business continuity plan to the company's public website and provide the link to all external partners and vendors. Option C. Implement a secure digital repository for the business continuity plan with role-based access controls, ensuring only authorized personnel can view specific sections relevant to their responsibilities. Option D. Distribute the business continuity plan via email to all employees and store hard copies in multiple easily accessible public areas within the facility. The correct answer is C. Implement a secure digital repository for the business continuity plan with role-based access controls, ensuring only authorized personnel can view specific sections relevant to their responsibilities. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for broad accessibility of critical business continuity plans, BCP, with the imperative to protect sensitive information and ensure only authorized personnel can access these documents. Inadequate distribution or access controls can lead to plan ineffectiveness during a disruption, or worse, unauthorized disclosure of confidential operational details, potentially causing reputational damage or competitive disadvantage. The challenge lies in implementing a system that is both robust and user-friendly, catering to diverse roles and responsibilities within the organization. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves implementing a tiered access control system for BCP documentation, leveraging secure digital platforms with role-based permissions. This aligns with general principles of information security and good governance, which are implicitly expected within professional practice for certifications like the CBCP. By granting access based on an individual's role and responsibilities in a continuity event, organizations ensure that those who need the plan can access it quickly, while simultaneously preventing unauthorized individuals from viewing sensitive information. This method directly addresses the core requirement of plan distribution and access, ensuring the plan is accessible to authorized personnel. It also supports the principle of least privilege, a fundamental security concept. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to distribute the BCP via a publicly accessible shared drive without any access restrictions. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure because it completely disregards the need for confidentiality and security of critical operational documents. Such an action would violate implicit expectations of data protection and could lead to severe consequences if sensitive information were compromised. Another incorrect approach is to store the BCP only in a single physical location accessible by a limited number of senior executives. While this offers some security, it fails the accessibility requirement. During a disruption, if those executives are unavailable or the physical location is compromised, the plan becomes inaccessible to the personnel who need to execute it, rendering it useless. This represents a failure in operational readiness and a disregard for the practical application of the BCP. A third incorrect approach is to distribute the BCP solely through email to all employees. While this ensures broad distribution, it lacks any control over who retains or accesses the information after the initial distribution. Emails can be forwarded, stored insecurely, and are difficult to update or retract. This approach fails to ensure that only authorized personnel have ongoing, secure access and can lead to the proliferation of outdated or compromised plan versions, creating confusion and risk during an incident. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach BCP distribution and access by first identifying all stakeholders who require access and categorizing their access needs based on their roles during a disruption. This involves conducting a risk assessment of potential threats to the plan's accessibility and confidentiality. The chosen distribution method should then be evaluated against these identified risks and stakeholder requirements, prioritizing secure, auditable, and role-based access controls. Regular review and testing of the distribution and access mechanisms are crucial to ensure their continued effectiveness and compliance with evolving organizational policies and best practices. Question 16. Investigation of a critical IT system failure within a U.S.-based financial services firm requires a comprehensive business impact analysis, which approach most effectively determines the full spectrum of consequences for each affected business function, adhering to regulatory expectations for financial institutions. Option A. Quantifying only the direct financial losses incurred from system downtime and estimating the cost of recovery efforts. Option B. Evaluating the impact on revenue generation, operational efficiency, customer service delivery, regulatory compliance, and brand perception for each function. Option C. Assessing the potential for customer dissatisfaction and negative media coverage, alongside the duration of operational interruption. Option D. Prioritizing the restoration of core transaction processing capabilities to minimize immediate financial losses, with secondary consideration for other impacts. The correct answer is A. Quantifying only the direct financial losses incurred from system downtime and estimating the cost of recovery efforts. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because accurately assessing the multifaceted impact of a disruption on critical business functions requires a nuanced understanding of interdependencies and potential cascading effects. A superficial assessment can lead to misallocation of recovery resources, prolonged downtime, and ultimately, failure to meet regulatory obligations and stakeholder expectations. Careful judgment is required to move beyond simply identifying affected functions to quantifying the severity and duration of their impact across financial, operational, reputational, and legal dimensions. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it systematically evaluates each critical business function against a defined set of impact criteria, aligning with the principles of robust business continuity planning mandated by regulatory frameworks such as those governing financial institutions or critical infrastructure. This methodical process ensures that all potential consequences are considered, enabling the prioritization of recovery efforts based on the most severe impacts. For example, under U.S. regulations like those from the Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council, FFIC, financial institutions are required to conduct thorough business impact analyses, BIA, that consider financial losses, operational disruptions, and reputational damage. This structured approach ensures that the organization can demonstrate due diligence and compliance with these requirements. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on financial impact is professionally unacceptable because it neglects other critical dimensions. For instance, a severe reputational impact, even if not immediately quantifiable in dollars, can lead to long-term customer attrition and market share loss, which is a significant regulatory and business concern. Similarly, ignoring legal and regulatory compliance impacts can result in substantial fines, sanctions, and legal liabilities, directly contravening the intent of regulations designed to ensure operational resilience and consumer protection. An approach that prioritizes operational recovery without considering the legal ramifications of continued operation or the reputational damage from a prolonged outage also fails to meet comprehensive BCP standards. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all critical business functions. For each function, they must then assess potential impacts across the four specified dimensions: financial, operational, reputational, legal, using predefined metrics and recovery time objectives, RTO, and recovery point objectives, RPO. This assessment should involve input from subject matter experts within each functional area. The results should be documented and reviewed to ensure a holistic understanding of the disruption's potential consequences, guiding the development of appropriate recovery strategies and resource allocation. This iterative process ensures that the BCP is aligned with the organization's risk appetite and regulatory obligations. Question 17. What factors determine the optimal selection of prevention and mitigation strategies for business continuity planning within the Certified Business Continuity Planner (CBCP) regulatory framework? Option A. The lowest upfront cost of implementing any prevention or mitigation measure without considering the potential impact of a disruption or the measure's effectiveness. Option B. A comprehensive assessment of potential threats and their likelihood, the potential business impact of disruptions, the cost-effectiveness of various mitigation measures, and adherence to relevant regulatory requirements. Option C. A subjective prioritization of risks based on anecdotal evidence and industry buzz, disregarding specific organizational vulnerabilities and regulatory mandates. Option D. The perceived technological sophistication of available prevention and mitigation solutions, regardless of their direct applicability or cost. The correct answer is B. A comprehensive assessment of potential threats and their likelihood, the potential business impact of disruptions, the cost-effectiveness of various mitigation measures, and adherence to relevant regulatory requirements. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a business continuity planner to balance the cost of prevention and mitigation measures against the potential impact of disruptions, all while adhering to specific regulatory requirements. The planner must make informed decisions that are not only cost-effective, but also demonstrably compliant with the relevant framework, ensuring the organization's resilience and the protection of its stakeholders. Careful judgment is required to prioritize investments in measures that offer the greatest reduction in risk for the resources available. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly aligns with the core principles of business continuity planning and the overarching goal of reducing the likelihood and impact of disruptions. By systematically evaluating potential threats, assessing their impact, and then selecting appropriate prevention and mitigation strategies based on a cost-benefit analysis and regulatory mandates, the planner ensures that resources are allocated efficiently and effectively. This proactive and risk-based methodology is a cornerstone of robust business continuity programs and is often implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory bodies to ensure operational resilience and the continuity of essential services. An incorrect approach that solely focuses on the lowest cost of implementation without considering the potential impact of a disruption or the effectiveness of the mitigation measure would be professionally unacceptable. This failure would violate the ethical obligation to provide adequate protection and could lead to significant financial losses, reputational damage, and regulatory penalties if a disruption occurs. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the most technologically advanced solutions without a clear understanding of their necessity or return on investment would be wasteful and inefficient, failing to meet the professional standard of prudent resource management. Furthermore, an approach that ignores specific regulatory requirements for prevention and mitigation, even if seemingly effective, would be a direct breach of compliance obligations, exposing the organization to legal and financial repercussions. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities. This should be followed by a business impact analysis to understand the consequences of disruption. Subsequently, prevention and mitigation strategies should be identified and evaluated based on their effectiveness in reducing likelihood and impact, their cost, and their alignment with regulatory requirements. A cost-benefit analysis should then guide the selection of the most appropriate measures, ensuring that the chosen strategies provide the best possible return on investment in terms of risk reduction and resilience. Continuous review and adaptation of these measures are also crucial to maintain their effectiveness in a changing threat landscape. Question 18. When evaluating data backup and recovery strategies for a financial services organization, which approach best aligns with regulatory expectations for data protection and operational resilience? Option A. Backing up all organizational data with the same frequency and retention period to ensure comprehensive data coverage. Option B. Selecting the least expensive backup solution available to minimize operational costs, regardless of its ability to meet recovery time or point objectives. Option C. Implementing a tiered backup strategy based on the criticality of data to business operations and regulatory compliance, with recovery objectives defined for each tier. Option D. Utilizing a single backup method and storage location to simplify management and reduce complexity. The correct answer is C. Implementing a tiered backup strategy based on the criticality of data to business operations and regulatory compliance, with recovery objectives defined for each tier. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because the organization operates in a highly regulated financial sector, where data integrity and availability are paramount. The CBCP must balance the need for robust data backup and recovery with cost-effectiveness and operational efficiency, all while adhering to stringent regulatory requirements. The pressure to demonstrate compliance to auditors and regulators adds another layer of complexity. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core of business continuity planning, understanding the impact of data loss on critical business functions and regulatory obligations. By performing a thorough impact assessment, the organization can prioritize data based on its criticality, RTO recovery time objective, and RPO recovery point objective. This allows for the development of a tiered backup and recovery strategy that aligns with business needs and regulatory mandates, such as those found in the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA, or the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, SOX, if this were a U.S.-based financial institution. This approach ensures that resources are allocated effectively to protect the most vital data and systems, thereby minimizing potential financial, operational, and reputational damage in the event of a disruption. It also provides auditable evidence of due diligence in data protection. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the cheapest available backup solution fails to consider the potential business impact of data loss and the regulatory requirements for data recovery. This could lead to insufficient data protection for critical systems, violating the spirit and letter of regulations that mandate the protection of customer data and the continuity of financial operations. Ethically, it represents a failure to adequately safeguard client information and maintain operational integrity. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes backing up all data with the same frequency and retention period, regardless of criticality, is inefficient and costly. While it might seem comprehensive, it doesn't align with the principle of risk management, which dictates focusing resources on the most significant threats and impacts. This approach can lead to wasted resources that could be better utilized for more critical data protection, potentially leaving key systems vulnerable. It also fails to demonstrate a strategic understanding of business needs and regulatory priorities. A third incorrect approach that relies on a single backup method without considering redundancy or diverse storage locations is highly risky. If the primary backup medium or location is compromised, e.g., by a fire, flood, or cyber attack, the entire backup strategy could fail. This directly contravenes regulatory expectations for resilience and data availability, as seen in guidelines from bodies like the Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council, FFIC, in the U.S., which emphasize robust disaster recovery and business continuity planning. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a structured risk assessment and business impact analysis. This includes identifying critical business processes, the data supporting them, potential threats, and the consequences of disruption. Based on this analysis, recovery objectives, RTO/RPO, are defined. The organization then evaluates various backup and recovery technologies and strategies, considering their alignment with these objectives, regulatory requirements, and budget constraints. The chosen strategy should be documented, tested regularly, and reviewed periodically to ensure its continued effectiveness and compliance. Question 19. The risk matrix shows a moderate probability of a localized structural fire impacting a specific wing of the office building. Considering the CBCP emphasis on personnel safety and U.S. regulatory requirements for emergency preparedness, which evacuation procedure best ensures the immediate and safe egress of all personnel? Option A. Initiate a lockdown procedure for the affected wing to contain the fire, while simultaneously attempting to remotely shut down non-essential IT systems to prevent data loss. Option B. Activate a predefined, clearly marked evacuation route to a designated assembly point, with provisions for assisting individuals with mobility challenges, and conduct regular drills to reinforce the procedure. Option C. Rely on building security to direct personnel to the nearest safe exit, assuming most employees will instinctively know how to proceed based on prior fire drills. Option D. Implement a phased evacuation, prioritizing critical personnel and systems first, then proceeding with general staff evacuation once essential operations are secured. Correct answer is D. Implement a phased evacuation, prioritizing critical personnel and systems first, then proceeding with general staff evacuation once essential operations are secured. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate safety needs with long-term operational resilience, all within the strict confines of the Certified Business Continuity Planner, CBCP, regulatory framework. The CBCP certification implies adherence to specific U.S.-based regulations and best practices, which prioritize life safety above all else during an emergency. The challenge lies in selecting an evacuation strategy that is both compliant and effective, considering the diverse needs of personnel and the potential impact on business operations post-event. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it aligns directly with the fundamental principle of life safety, which is paramount in any business continuity or disaster recovery plan under U.S. regulations. Specifically, it emphasizes clear, accessible, and regularly practiced evacuation routes and assembly points, ensuring that all personnel, including those with disabilities, can be safely evacuated. This approach is supported by guidelines from organizations like FEMA and OSHA, which are implicitly part of the CBCP jurisdictional scope. Ethical considerations also dictate prioritizing human well-being. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on minimizing disruption to critical business functions during an evacuation fails to uphold the primary ethical and regulatory obligation of protecting human life. This would be a direct violation of life safety mandates. Another incorrect approach that relies on outdated or unpracticed evacuation procedures or fails to account for individuals with special needs demonstrates negligence and a lack of due diligence, potentially leading to severe consequences and regulatory penalties. Such an approach ignores the requirement for comprehensive and inclusive emergency planning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough risk assessment, followed by a comprehensive review of applicable U.S. regulations, e.g., OSHA emergency action plans. The plan must then be developed with a clear hierarchy of priorities, placing life safety at the absolute top. This involves engaging with all stakeholders, including employees, to ensure the plan is practical and understood. Regular drills and reviews are crucial to validate the effectiveness of the chosen evacuation procedures and to identify areas for improvement, ensuring continuous compliance and enhanced safety. Question 20. The efficiency study reveals that the organization's emergency response protocols are experiencing delays in critical decision-making and information dissemination during simulated crisis events. Which of the following optimization strategies best aligns with the principles of process improvement, while ensuring adherence to established regulatory frameworks for business continuity and crisis management? Option A. Streamline the incident command structure by consolidating roles and responsibilities without consulting relevant regulatory guidelines or conducting impact assessments. Option B. Rely on anecdotal evidence from recent minor incidents to make ad hoc adjustments to the crisis management plan, prioritizing speed over formal validation. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of existing emergency response procedures, cross-referencing them with relevant regulatory requirements and industry best practices to identify specific bottlenecks and areas for enhancement, followed by a phased implementation of targeted improvements with rigorous testing and validation. Option D. Immediately implement a new, unproven communication platform that promises faster information sharing, bypassing the standard review and approval process to expedite the response. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive review of existing emergency response procedures, cross-referencing them with relevant regulatory requirements and industry best practices to identify specific bottlenecks and areas for enhancement, followed by a phased implementation of targeted improvements with rigorous testing and validation. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in business continuity planning, optimizing emergency response and crisis management processes to ensure compliance and effectiveness. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for rapid, decisive action during an incident with the requirement to adhere to established protocols and regulatory mandates, particularly those relevant to the Certified Business Continuity Planner (CBCP) certification, which often aligns with U.S. federal guidelines, such as those from FEMA and NIST. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any optimization does not inadvertently create gaps in compliance or reduce the overall resilience of the organization's response capabilities. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, evidence-based review that directly addresses identified inefficiencies while ensuring continued adherence to regulatory frameworks. This aligns with the principles of continuous improvement mandated by many standards and the ethical obligation of a CBCP to maintain robust and compliant continuity plans. Specifically, it ensures that any changes are validated against existing requirements, such as those outlined in FEMA National Incident Management System, NIMS, or NIST Cybersecurity Framework, which emphasize clear roles, responsibilities, and communication channels during emergencies. This approach fosters a proactive and compliant crisis management posture. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed without considering the regulatory implications would fail to meet the core responsibilities of a CBCP. For instance, bypassing established communication protocols to expedite information dissemination could violate data privacy regulations or internal governance policies, leading to legal repercussions and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing new technologies without proper risk assessment and integration testing could introduce vulnerabilities, compromising the integrity of the response and potentially violating cybersecurity mandates. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or unverified assumptions for process changes risks creating a response that is not only inefficient but also non-compliant, potentially leading to penalties under relevant U.S. regulations governing emergency preparedness and response. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the current state, including existing processes, regulatory requirements, and identified inefficiencies. This is followed by a structured evaluation of potential optimization strategies, assessing each against compliance mandates, risk tolerance, and operational impact. The chosen strategy should then be piloted, tested, and validated before full implementation, with ongoing monitoring to ensure continued effectiveness and compliance. This iterative and evidence-based process ensures that optimizations enhance, rather than compromise, the organization's ability to respond effectively and compliantly to emergencies.